I've heard that storing food makes you a target. Today we're going to address this and a bunch of other food storage myths. Hey Provident Preppers, I'm Jonathan.
And I'm Kylene. There are so many myths about food storage, and people talk and some people don't really know what they're talking about. We've got a lot of experience, real life experience, packaging food storage and using food storage for a lot of years. And so we're going to debunk some of the myths that are out there about food storage, including the one about whether or not it makes you a target. And then at the end of this video, we're going to share with you what our recommendation is for having a food storage plan. So let's get busy with number one.
All this food has to be repackaged, and that discourages a lot of people from actually getting things done because they think, it's too much work. In most cases, you're not going to have to repackage food. Now, there are some things that do need to be repackaged, especially if you're going for long-term storage.
For the most part, there are a lot of foods that you can go to the store, and what we're talking about is just building a well-stocked pantry. Something where you have plenty of food in your pantry so that you don't have to go to the store for a few months. Number two, the best if used by date is the date that food goes bad. That is so not true. This is a can of soup that we purchased back in 2015. Now, most of the time we try and rotate our food storage, but this is something that we have just in case we have emergencies. Most of the time we eat from scratch, but if we had an earthquake or something, this would be great stuff. So right now what's happening with this, because it is 2015, is it's being fed mostly to our puppy. You look at this, it's still just fine. It's 2023. It's what, 8 years old?
Smells good.
Yeah, but it doesn't smell as good as my soup. And that's why it's still on the shelf. So the best if used by date on the can, it's not an indication that the food goes bad. It's because the manufacturer has to store samples from each batch and keep them for a period of time. So it's for the convenience of the manufacturer, not to tell you when it's gone bad.
So you definitely want to be aware of food that has gone bad. And we have, from time to time, had things like applesauce and tomato products start showing signs of going bad. Definitely you do not want to mess with that. But in most cases, these foods will stay good for a very long time, as long as the can isn't damaged or bulged.
Smells good, looks good.
Right.
Right?
It's probably going to be just fine. Number three, Mylar makes food last for 30 years. Well, that's not true. Now, a lot of foods will store in number 10 cans for 30 years, but the Mylar isn't quite as good an environment.
We hear so many people saying, oh, I'm going to put it in Mylar and then it will last forever. And that's not true. There are certain foods that if stored in a cool, dry, dark location could last for 30 years. We don't recommend that, right? We actually recommend rotating it. But just because you stick something in a Mylar bag doesn't mean that it's going to last long term. All foods have a certain life. Like here we've got some flour. Now I could repackage it in Mylar or glass jars or plastic peat bottles, but flour is still gonna just have a limited shelf life. And in fact, we've got a whole video where we tasted older flours. Mm-hmm. So if you click on the card in the corner, we'll take you to one of those videos, or that video, so that you can see what happens when flour's on the shelf for a long time. I recommend about 5 years. It's edible much past that. It's just not
ideal.
Not ideal.
Yep. Yeah. And do remember that these Mylar bags are very susceptible to rodents. So, if you're going to use Mylar, have a secondary container, something that will keep the mice and rodents away from ruining that.
Yeah. Number four, food storage is expensive. Well, let me tell you, food storage can be expensive depending on how you do it. But we have raised 11 children on a single income. Now, that means that we had to get really creative in order to be able to feed our family, which means it was back to basics. We had a lot of beans and rice and oats, and I made almost everything from scratch. I shopped the sales so that whenever something went on sale, I stocked up. So for us, food storage actually made our daily living significantly less expensive and enabled us to feed a whole lot more people on a lower budget.
Now, number 5, food storage is a waste of resources. And this one, I could not disagree more. This is security. This is peace of mind. And as a worst case, you're going to eat it. In fact, it's a very good use for your resources. It's a way of hedging yourself for the future.
It's like an insurance policy.
Yeah.
We pay insurance policies every year. We pay for our car and our life and our medical and our home. And that money just goes out there, right? And there's a reason you pay that. Well, food storage is hunger insurance. And I think it is definitely not a waste of resources. Now, number 6 is the myth that commercially packaged food storage is the best. I feel like it's absolutely not. In fact, we stay away from it when we can. There are certain things we will buy commercially packaged. For instance, from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints, you can get the number 10 cans with dry beans and white rice and potato flakes, things like that already packaged. The price is really reasonable. I think that's a great thing. You can go to a place like Augustin Farms and get some of their number 10 can basics. That's not the kind of stuff that I'm talking about. I'm talking about the packaged food storage programs. We got one that was sent to us. It was a month's supply in a bucket. And when we went through it, the ingredients, it was like oats that had a ton of sugar in it and cream, but it wasn't cream. It was like artificial everything. And I'm looking at the label thinking, if I ate this, this is gonna kill me. It was all marketing. Be so careful of marketing. And I'm not saying you shouldn't buy any of that. There are some freeze-dried foods out there that are a really good thing. For me, a lot of them have too many preservatives and salt, and I would rather eat from scratch. Now, that being said, remember, I'm the one that's always making my soup from scratch, and I'm not buying the cans. Well, I buy them, but we don't use them very often. So it depends on you and your personal preferences, but my personal preference is to buy the foods that we normally eat and stock up on those and not depend on some marketing hype and overpriced food storage.
I totally agree. And remember, this is very expensive food. You have to know what you are getting. If you want to go that road, that's fine, but make sure you understand, because the way it's couched is often you're thinking meals, and in fact, they're talking about servings. So you have so many servings, but in many cases, that doesn't even get you close to the calories you need for the day, and probably not even close on any of the nutrients. And we encourage you to start with the basics that are much less expensive. And then if you've got the money and you want some of those fancier things, do it.
Now, number 7 is that food storage is too complicated. There are too many rules to remember, and I don't know all of what to do or how much to store, whatever. Just, it doesn't have to be complicated. You could do a spreadsheet like Jonathan, and it could be very complicated. Or you can do it more like what I like to do, where I just have a place for everything, right? I have a place for proteins, and I have a place for like rice and beans and things like that. And that's more kind of what I do, but it doesn't have to be any more complicated than going to the store and buying extra and making sure that your pantry is full or that your freezer is full. That's as complicated as it really has to get.
Number 8, doing it wrong is deadly. And in some extremely rare instances, I suppose that could happen. But in most cases, it doesn't. You understand some of the basics, and Mama, tell them a little bit about the basics.
The big concern is botulism, right? That I'm going to kill my family because of botulism. So there's a couple important points I want to share with you. And the first one is that you need to choose foods that are good candidates for long-term storage. If you're doing long-term storage, if you're just buying a can and putting it on the shelf, you don't really need to worry about it. But the food needs to be low in moisture, like 10% or less when you're putting it into a reduced oxygen environment. It should be low in fat. So there are 3 components for botulism. One is moisture, one is pH, and the other is water acuity. So there's a lot of different factors that play into that. But the cool thing that you need to know is that say you did by some remote chance get botulism in a dry good. Well, by cooking that at 185 degrees for at least 5 minutes, you're going to kill the toxins that can make you sick. So just think about that. If you're just really freaked out and worried about it, make sure that you're cooking your food. Now, one of the borderline items that a lot of times we're worried about, popcorn, usually runs about 13% moisture. Your risk of botulism is super low with popcorn. It's a dry good. It meets all the criteria for good shelf stable. But what I usually do with popcorn is I'll buy it in the container already packaged. And you can see it's already sealed. And they have packaged this appropriately. So most of the time, I'll just buy it like this and put it on my shelf and I don't worry about it. The other thing that I'll do is if I buy a big 50-pound bag, I'll put it in either glass bottles or plastic sheet bottles, but I won't use an oxygen absorber because I don't want to create that low oxygen environment and create that risk. Don't stress. If you're really worried about that, canned food and already packaged foods, or like in the number 10 cans that you just buy, you don't have to worry about it at all because they should have packaged it appropriately.
And there are some great resources out there. If you don't know the moisture level in it,
I'll leave a link in the description of this video to a super good one. Number 9, it's overwhelming by everything that I have to know and do. And quite frankly, just simplify it. Don't make it so complicated. Just buy extra stuff when you go to the store. For instance, I call this the Costco mentality, right? So when you go to Costco, you don't buy one can of something.
And let me just interrupt here. I'm not a fan of Spam. This is a Sam thing.
This is a Sam thing.
This is a Sam thing.
We buy this because we love him.
But that's okay, whatever it is.
Okay, but this is a good package to show you because when you go to Costco, you're not just buying one, there are 8 in here. So if you just think about doing it with that bulk mentality, it's less overwhelming. You just buy a few at a time instead of one at a time. And before you know it, you've stocked up. Just make sure that you're putting it in a good place where you can organize it and you know what you have, because the disorganization can be overwhelming.
And this is the proverbial elephant. Sometimes we look at the whole elephant and there's no way I could eat that. But a bite at a time, a step at a time, like I like to say, small, steady steps, just continuing to do it, and we get there.
All right, number 10, we have to store whole wheat. This is food storage, right?
Well, that's just a standard. That's what
this is
we
what
just do, right?
Everybody needs to have. You've got to have whole wheat, right? Now, we have whole wheat. Absolutely, we have whole wheat because we use it all the time, right? I cook with it. Make sure it doesn't fall off. I cook with it, and we enjoy it. John loves whole wheat bread. Yep. We have the grain mill, and that's what we do. But because we do that, doesn't mean that you have to do that. Just store the foods that you normally like to eat, because that will make sure that you're rotating it, that you'll stay fed, and that when you need to use that food storage, it won't be change for you, right? And those dietary changes, not only can they be hard on your body, but they can be hard on you emotionally too.
Number 11, you never have enough. And for some people, this definitely is a problem. They don't know when to stop. And definitely we should not stop our preparedness efforts because we are continually rotating, we're continually using, but there has to be wisdom and there has to be reason. And there are financial constraints, there are space constraints, and we have to live within those. We have to make it work for us. So it shouldn't become our slave, it should become our servant.
I think that we need to have enough food storage to get us through hard times, right? And we don't know how long those hard times are going to last. And that's when you just have to listen to the Spirit and pray about it and say, okay, how much do I really need? But we have people that we associate with that seriously have rooms and rooms of food storage. And I'm not sure that we really need that much. I think we should really be reasonable because I believe that the best is yet to come. We're going to have hard times and we need to get through that, but the best is yet to come.
And this is very individual. Again, this is something that You decide, we're not basing this off some list that somebody put together. This is you deciding what's appropriate for you and your family and your loved ones, and then making that happen.
So now that's number 12 is storing food, or having food storage makes you a target. Well, let's talk about that. First, if you're going to the store and you are buying massive amounts and everybody's seeing you go out with all these cartloads of food, it could make you a target. But that's not the way that we stock up. Like, we stock up by doing the Costco thing, or when something like these canned soups, they went on sale, 99 cents a can, and I bought whatever amount I needed. I like to target enough for a year, just because that's us, right? Because that's kind of the sales cycle. But if you're just buying stuff when it's on sale, it doesn't look like there's a big deal, and nobody needs to know that you're stocking up. The other thing is, don't tell people about it. Don't go bragging and saying, hey, I have a year's supply of food. What do you have? No, don't do that. Do you want to be a target? It's your verbalization of what you have. Now, I know you're looking at me saying, well, look what you're doing. And yeah, we're on YouTube and we are targets, but we encourage you not to be a target. The last thing we want to talk about is our advice. We recommend that you have 3 months worth of food that is just what you eat every day. Like, you've got your meat in your freezer if you're eating meat, you've got butter in your freezer, or whatever it is that you want to keep in your freezer. You've got all kinds of shelf-stable foods that you normally eat, so that you wouldn't have to go to the market for at least 3 months. And then the longer term supply. You get to decide how much you have there, but those are the dry goods and things that you have in your number 10 cans. And seriously, the least expensive place that we know of to purchase quality basic food storage is from the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints home storage centers. And I will leave a link. You don't have to be a member. They don't ask you any questions. You can also buy it online from them. In some of the foreign countries, you can't get it, but here in the continental United States, it's really easy to be able to get that. Now, let's talk comfort foods. Okay, emotionally, when really bad things are happening, you need something that says life is still good. And a lot of us, our culture very much revolves around food. And so there are some foods that you may want to have in your food storage. Now, I personally don't drink any carbonated beverages, but I have some dear friends who can't survive without Diet Pepsi. In fact, when COVID started, we had gone to the market and we saw one of our friends, and she was just stocking up on massive amounts of Diet Pepsi, because for her, that's what she needs. That's her comfort food. And for me, it's chocolate. For John, it's peanut butter. We all have our own versions of comfort foods. You make sure that you have a nice supply of that in your food storage, because the myth that everybody around me is going to be happy if I don't have chocolate is definitely a myth.
Ooh, bad miscalculation.
Okay, and then the final thing, seriously, only store what you eat. Make it, otherwise it's just a waste. And we have made this mistake several different times. And I think I've talked about the time I bought salmon that had the bones and the skin in it. And I know some of you love that, but for me, totally freaked me out because I thought it was supposed to look like tuna. So make sure that you're not looking at it saying, oh, this, we might really want this someday. Buy what you really eat.
And now for the question of the day. What myths have you bought into? Comment below. And thanks for being part of the solution.